to become a good rider is way easier, way easier than it is to become a good horseman. But if you want to be a horseman and a rider at the same time and be in the competition ring and be successful, if you want to do it everything, then it takes balance.
Daniel Bluman is a 3-time Olympian and world-class Grand Prix winner. But he recently sent me a message that completely shifted my perspective. He didn't want to talk about prize money or podiums. He wanted to talk about why we chase external validation and lose the horse in the process. This is an honest look at the massive divide between a rider who focuses strictly on the ring result and a horseman who prioritizes a deep biological understanding of the animal. If you want to build a true partnership that puts the horse first, this conversation is exactly what you need to hear.
Dear Horse World, it's Daniel Bluman.
Daniel, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so I want to kind of share a little bit of background for our listeners and everyone who's watching the episode, because we're here because you messaged me after you watched Rodrigo's episode.
Yeah.
And we had what I love, and for anyone who knows you, who's listened to this episode, they'll appreciate this as a very Daniel moment. We had this awesome back and forth conversation of what that podcast brought up for you. And so it's so naturally and organically turned into, hey, let's, like, when I come to Wellington, let's have a conversation. And that's something that I have always really appreciated about you, is how approachable and how easy it is to talk about all facets of this horse world, of this sport with you. Do you find that you're like that?
Yeah, I love what we do. I'm incredibly grateful about the life we have and what the horses have given us. And I am the number one fan of the sport at the same time. So I can really appreciate, good conversations. I can appreciate good podcasts. I can appreciate good articles. And I try to get something from it, from all of them, because I think that all of us different riders and horsemen have different stories and have different situations and have different upbringings. And to try to understand each other and to understand each other's life gives us a better understanding of what it takes, to do it well. And in my particular situation, when I heard the one about Rodrigo, is what would be my approach with my own children?
Yeah.
And my own children now ride, and I want to be as educated as possible to see how I can be the best for them, not only for them to be riders if they decide to do that, but also obviously and most importantly to be great horsemen if they decide to be in this industry. And above everything, that they're happy and healthy, well-balanced people when they grow up.
Okay, so before we dive in, because the meat of this conversation, I'm so excited to dive into with you, which is going to be about, the dichotomy of being a great rider and a great horseman, right? And I'm so excited. I think our listeners are going to get so much out of your perspective on this. But you said something before we pressed record. You said something that I just lit up, and I just about bounced off the sofa. We were talking about mentality and the way that the way of the horseman, the life of the horseman is really actually very connected to nature. And first of all, I hadn't heard a top rider, at least not in conversation with me. I've not heard a top rider reference the connection to nature the way that you have, and that it's a fundamental part of a rider's life. So I want you to expand on that for everybody, because it really, first of all, it took me back, realizing that no one had ever referenced that before. And I want you to expand on that thought and to talk to me about really what you believe is like distilling features of great horse people in the industry as a whole.
You see, I'm gonna try to explain the best way possible, right? To do it right for the idea, But this is something that I keep very present on my day to day. I think, or I find that nature is an incredible blessing, especially nowadays when you see so much digital and so many outside forces coming into our life, from very different things happening. The one thing that is consistent is nature, and we are so blessed, to be able to work surrounded by nature. Not only the horses, which obviously is incredible, but the farms themselves. The places where we work. Our office is a farm. And I always say to myself, that we are glamorous farmers, but nevertheless farmers. That's what we are. If you want to be a great in this sport, and you want to be a great horseman and a great rider, you have to appreciate the life of the farmer. You have to appreciate starting the day every day, regardless of the weather, and being out there with the horses, and being out there with your staff and your team, and taking care of your farm, taking care of your place, making sure, that it's clean, that it's good for the horses, that they have the right grass, that they have, no different than when you're a farmer and you're working with the chicken, or you're working with the cows, or you're working with the sheep, or whatever you're working. We work with the horses, but we're just farmers, at the very end. That we are so lucky that the sport has evolved in a direction that has allowed us to have the more glamour, and do much better business, and get much more sophisticated, and all these things. Sure, and I appreciate that. I think all of that is also great, but the roots of it is the land. The roots of it is the animals, and that is the true beauty of the lifestyle that we have the possibility to live nowadays. If we don't appreciate and value that root, I think we're just in the wrong industry. Maybe we should just do something different altogether, because then we're doing it for the wrong reasons.
So when people in the industry want to make show jumping, let's say, more like Formula One, which is the antithesis of farming, right?
Yeah.
How do you think, like, what would you want everyone to hear when we're talking about this? What do you wish the industry to keep focused on? As more money comes in, there are more show jumping events than there have ever been. And there's more prize money. There's so much money being injected into the sport of show jumping. How would you like the industry, if you could speak to the whole industry right now, especially the economics of it, what would you like people to keep in mind or not forget?
Yeah, I think it's just the not forget and keep in mind. I appreciate all of that is happening. I think it's great, the influx of resources and competitions and all these things, as long as you don't forget the root. If you remember the roots, and the reason why we do this, and why we are not unique in the sense of the sport. And what do I mean by that? We are unique, perhaps, in the fact that we can get to go to all these different shows and venues, and these glamorous, beautiful places, and all that stuff. That makes us unique amongst the people that own and ride horses. But what doesn't make us unique is that we ride horses. Just like someone that owns a horse, when I'm driving down the road and they have a horse in their backyard, they ride that horse, they love that horse, they feed that horse, they take care of that horse. That horse means something to them. They trailer the horse to the hospital when he's sick. They take care of their horse. They do everything, and then one day they have to say goodbye to their horse, and let them pass to whatever is next, or however you want to call it, and keep going, and then maybe get another horse. And we have all that in common with the people that own horses. And I always say that if we want our sport to survive and to continue to be what it is, we have to not forget that that's what links us with the horse lovers. If we end up going into a sport where even the people that love horses and ride and even jump and do some sport don't admire or don't look up to, then we're totally disconnected. And in order not to be disconnected, we can't forget about the roots that actually connect us. And it's not that we shouldn't forget about those roots because we want to connect with the people. The connection with the people is just a consequence. The fact is, we should never disconnect from those roots, because that's what's going to preserve the sport and preserve a healthy lifestyle for everyone that wants to do the sport in many years to come. So I am not against the more shows. I'm not against taking a lot of the great things that Formula One is doing, and implementing it in the sport of show jumping as the sport, and I think that aspect is very good. But we can't forget that behind that, there's a lot. Just like when you look at Formula One, Formula One, behind everything that you're seeing, there's a lot of things that are also happening. It's just not what people are looking at. And that's what we have to be very careful of what we teach our younger generation, so that they understand that before getting to the glamour and, the prize money and, the big businesses and the big brands and all this kind of stuff, there is life of a simple kid or a simple family with their group, taking care of their horses, taking care of their land, and just making a life, and then some of us have been so lucky that we ended up being able to get the right information, make more good decisions than bad decisions, and we ended up making it to the top of the sport. And that's great, but I know a lot of people that have not had the trajectory that some of us have had, yet are great horsemen and are great people and live great lives. So we have to be always very objective when we want to get into the horse world and understand why we're doing it. And if the answer is the wrong answer, I truly advise the family of the people and the friends to advise this person to maybe pursue something else. Because if the only thing that you're wanting to get is that fame or that glamour or stuff like that, you're going to live a very miserable life.
Why?
Because you can never get enough. There's never enough victories. There's never enough Grand Prix wins. There's never enough high ranking. There's just never enough. You want more. And then if you fall down that path, you're going to finish your career. And even if you have all the accolades in the world, you're not going to be fulfilled. But in the other side, if you actually do it for the right reasons and you wake up to do what you love, with people that you love, with animals that you love, to train, to work, to do what we do, then you're already fulfilled. Everything that happens after that, how much you win or, your accolades, is just extra. But nobody can take away the fulfillment of what really matters, which is, in my opinion, the roots of this sport. And I've had the chance to travel, and I grew up in Colombia for my first few years. Then I was in South Florida, and I was pretty much stuck to those two areas of the world. I didn't get to travel very much when I was younger. And as I got to travel and I got to see the horsemen and the people in our industry from the different countries and continents, as a matter of fact, and even in the United States, in other states, I had so much more appreciation and love for our sport. I already loved it when I was little. I love it even more now because I got to see, like some of these families in different parts of the world that love their horses. They breed, they ride. It's like something they do together as a family.
Yeah.
And they go and they see the shows together. And for them, it's a big thing. And then, sometimes they get lucky and one of their kids or nephews or sisters or someone ends up being a good rider, and then they end up making it up. And
Totally.
it's just so beautiful. And then you go to those barns, those old barns, and, everything is more simple. And, the horses are happy and the people are happy. And you go into these tack rooms that are half tack room, half like something else, and there's always like the hot coffee that they're going to offer you. And then, I just find that to be so beautiful, and how even in those winter days, you go in there and they have their little fire going on, and the horse is hairy because it's colder, and they just pull the horse out of the stall, throw that tack on, and then you ride it. I think this is beautiful. I think that's the essence of what we do, and that is the horse. Then, once you start developing and getting into all these different ideas and products and one thing and the next thing, at the very end, this is simple. And it's been simple for generations, and it's been simple in different ways, perhaps depending where you come from. The French have their ways, the German have their ways, the English have their ways, in Australia they have their ways, the American have their ways, in South America, in Argentina, or in Brazil, they had their ways. But all of them were around the horse.
Yeah.
All of them were horsemen. Different in practices, different in their views, and different in their approach, but all horsemen. And that's something that I believe we have to preserve, no matter what. Above all.
Yeah.
Above all. Welcome everything else that is happening to the industry. I think all is great, but we must preserve that, no matter what.
How well, first of all, actually, before I ask you that question, I want to say that, first of all, just for my own journey, because, and this, here we are in Wellington. It's so, I said to you, I've been coming to Wellington for over a decade. And I still love it and appreciate it, but it doesn't feel like real life. Like, it doesn't feel like the real horse world. It feels like a version of the horse world. And so I really appreciate, just from my own journey with my own horses and my own place, like, I really appreciate that, like, hey, make yourself a horse first facility or a horse first barn, like, really focus on the things that matter, which is the care and consideration of your horses, which, so I think our listeners are really going to appreciate that, like, that call to action. It's like a banner that
Yeah.
they can wear. But how do we preserve that? Because there's more pulling riders in lots of different directions. There's more demands, there's more expectations from sponsors to be on social media. There's more opportunities to make make money and promote products. Like, how do we, from your perspective, how do we keep horsemanship at the core of the evolution of things?
Well, I think that we have to fall in love with the lifestyle of the horseman. I think you cannot force anyone to do anything. It's not possible. We can educate, and through education, people can learn, and through learning, they can fall in love with it. Because the fact is that what we do, and this lifestyle is incredible. It's
Mhm.
beautiful. Like, what is there not to love? But if you're not introduced to it the right way, or at all, then you don't have a way to fall in love with it.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think that obviously when you're growing up, and when you don't have the tools in your brain and in your emotions to be able to to stay out of the instant gratification, or walk away from what seems to be cool, right? You wanna get some attention, you wanna get recognition. This is something that is human. All of us want it in some level or another, especially when we're growing up and we don't have the tools to identify really what is it that driving us to something. We could get easily distracted. In my personal situation, I had the luck to work with some great horsemen. That
Like, let's say, because
that
they are some amazing things.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I had the opportunity to work with Nelson Pessoa. I've had the opportunity, to work with Jeroen Duveldam, with Hans Horn. I've been very, very blessed to work with some incredible horsemen that also had amazing success, right? So I was always driven by both lives. I've always loved the horses and taking care of them ever since I was very young. But I obviously wanted to have some recognition. I wanted to make a life out of it. I wanted to make a business out of it. I need to do something with my life, right? And having the opportunity to see them very close and work with them very close and see their philosophy, and also see how successful they've been and they are, show me that there was a way to do both. So what we have to do is educate people, on these things, and also let them know that the fact is that the majority of the best riders in the world, and I'm not saying all, but a great majority, are great horsemen. They live the life of a great horseman. And in my particular case, I would always admire, and like me, there's many others because I've spoken to a lot of different riders and fans of the sport. I would always appreciate much more the horseman that has had success than the not horseman that maybe won more classes or had more ribbons or had more Grand Prix wins. I will always cherish those moments from those horsemen riders and real um, humans that practice the sport in this way that I love so much.
Mhm.
And those moments from when those riders win still today, and they are in many ways obviously my direct competition. Well, when these riders that I admire so much, these horsemen that are also riders, win, I smile.
Yeah.
I like it. I'm their fan. I want them to do well. When when I'm going to compete against them, those guys and girls are the ones that I still fear. Put it that way. Like I see them and I still see an idol.
Cool.
And I will till the end of my things. The other ones that are maybe to a sport in a different way, that it's not my type of sport. Yeah, they're there. If they win, cool. If they don't win,
But you don't celebrate them.
no, I don't admire that sport. It's just not the sport that I like. Because the sport that I like always would put the horse first. no matter what, above the result. The horse will always come first. And sure, in certain instances, you're going to have to postpone gratification, sometimes too much. Sometimes to a point that you just postponed it all the way and you never actually won with that horse because you wanted to do it the right way. And some horses just don't make it. They are not good enough for that level in this system. But when they are, and you actually end up hitting those relationships, those horses, you establish those connections, and you actually start having success, that there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. And the public also knows. And the horse lovers also understand. And they identify with this. So you can have, as a horseman, a career where you have 50% of the accolades of some other riders. Yet, if you do it the right way, you're going to end up getting just the same results when it comes to business, when it comes to awareness, recognition, everything else. So, at the end, everything plays out right. If you do it well, you might think that you're not going to get at the end the gratification that some others are getting, but that's incorrect. If you stick your way and you do it the right way and, you stay honest to your path, everything works in a way that you end up getting more than you ever dream you could get.
So I want to take this opportunity in this moment to delineate between when you're talking about a horseman who happens to be a rider and a person who is a rider who's maybe not, who doesn't make horse first decisions. I want you to explain in your words the difference so that everyone who's watching or listening to this episode can educate their eye and their mind when they're listening to you and they're understanding that you're making a delineation between these two people.
Yeah, I think that the first part that is very important about this is to understand that horsemanship is very complex.
At Conaway & Associates Equine Insurance Services, they understand how special your horse is. That's why I personally chose to work with them to insure my horses before we embarked on this epic journey across the country. I chose them because their agency writes coverage in 48 states. They also work with several A-rated admitted insurance carriers, so you have options and can select the insurance coverage that best suits your own unique needs. Having confidence in my insurance selection allows me peace of mind on this journey. I can focus on my horses and embrace these learning opportunities of a lifetime. Who better to trust with the insurance of your horse than a team of fellow horse people? Conaway & Associates was founded in 1992 by Laura Conaway, herself a Grand Prix show jumping rider. Laura and her experienced team have built a strong reputation as a reliable partner, building relationships through service, trust, and understanding. Explore www.conaway.net or call them for competitive, personalized insurance coverage options from their team of like-minded equine insurance professionals.
Horsemanship is very complex. Like when you say you want to be a horseman, or people use the term horseman, it sounds simple, yet it's very complex. To be a horseman, you really have to have tremendous understanding of the horse as an animal.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with sport, just as an animal. What is best for the horse? How do they eat? How do they exercise? How do they sleep? How do they spend their time? What weather they like?
How do they learn?
How do they learn? How do they interact with each other?
Yeah.
How do their feet work? How do they recover from injury? There is on and on and on. First of all, it takes many years.
Yeah.
To become a good rider is way easier, way easier than it is to become a good horseman. In fact, most of us will always be first good riders before we are good horsemen. The horseman will, because it takes longer time, it takes more time, it takes more experiences, it takes a lot of different factors that have to come in order to get there. So there's the difference between one and the other, right? A horseman, or in order to be able to be the best horseman you can be, naturally you have to spend time with the horses.
Yeah.
There's no way you can be a horseman if you're all the time in an airplane. If you're traveling from one place to the next, from place to the next, it's very difficult to do your job as a horseman, put it that way. Because there's horsemen that became horsemen and then they made of their lives working and helping other people.
Yes.
Through their skills.
Yes.
they're already horsemen. But if you want to be a horseman and a rider at the same time and be in the competition ring and be successful, if you want to do it everything, then it takes balance. It's a package, and you need to find it. How much can you travel? How much do you have to stay at home? How many horses can you manage? Because if you have too many horses, you cannot give enough attention to each of the horses.
Yeah.
If you have too many horses, that means you need more employees. And every person that works in a barn needs to have an understanding of their tasks.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say everyone that works in each organization is a horseman, because that would be a lie. There's people that don't need to be horsemen in order to perform certain tasks in an organization. But when you have a strong organization, you cannot be the only horseman. You need to have other people that might not be riders, might not be ring riders, but they're nonetheless amazing horsemen. We have grooms that are incredible horsemen. We have riders that are home riders that are incredible horsemen. We have trainers that are incredible horsemen, yet never jumped a Grand Prix. Never. Not even close. Some of them never even showed.
Yeah.
And they're great horsemen. So there's the horseman aspect of it. Now, when you speak about riders, what is a good rider? A good rider is someone that can get on a horse and in the sport of show jumping has the ability and the experience to go in the ring and get a result. Jump the fences clear and go fast. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
And there's many people that can ride a horse and have a nice position, have some feeling, and they can go fast in the jump off. There's some better than others. Naturally, some have outstanding skills, like, wow, look how they can turn, they can go fast, their position, natural position, strength, balance, all these things. And listen, super admirable anyways, like, who doesn't like to see a good rider in the ring? I think that's really cool. But in my view, or how I enjoy the sport, I want to see the combination of both. I love that. It's just a personal, I don't judge anyone that sees it differently. It's just what I like, and gratefully, some of the best riders by ranking in the world are great horsemen. So I'm able to enjoy that.
Well, and maybe they're great. You do think that there's a correlation, because in order to be great, you have to have endurance, and to have endurance, you have to have a bigger why than just to win, because we all know that if you're a top ranking show jumping rider, you're still going to lose more times than you win. So you have to have a greater why. But I want you to describe, because this is something that has come up in a lot of recent conversations we've had on the podcast, where you're watching a rider in the arena and you can see the shift, and I know you know what I mean. You'll see the shift from putting the horse first to maybe becoming a bit more of a showman, or asking beyond what that horse is capable of doing, because they are getting maybe caught up in the moment.
Yeah.
And this happens not just in show jumping, it happens in lots of different horse sports. And the more refined your eye becomes, the more you can start to see that shift. And sometimes it happens right at the beginning, or before that rider even enters the arena. Sometimes it happens on course, or during like a demonstration, for example.
Yeah.
I would love for you, from your perspective, because I love the way that you explain this, the way you articulate this. I would love for you to explain to our listeners what is happening inside the rider's mind, because you know what I mean.
Yeah.
When you're making a decision that's in the best interest of the horse, or you're making a decision that's in the best interest of the moment.
Yeah. Look, it's obviously very hard. I mean, you're dealing with a lot of human emotions, and circumstances, obviously, because we're jumping some horses that we don't own ourselves. We're jumping for a lot of prize money. You're jumping for recognition. So in a moment, you have to make decisions, of what you're going to do. And I don't think that anyone gets them always right. I do think that some of us have our North Star, as I say, very, very, very clear. So we make the right decision most of the times. And by right decision, I don't mean the decision that ended up being the winner of the class. I mean the decision that was what was right for the horse. But it is very hard, and I understand it because I live it, and that's why I am not too harsh to judge others when they make the wrong decision, because I understand what they're going through. What I don't appreciate is some that make the wrong decision too many times. Some that make the wrong decision knowing they're making the wrong decision.
Like, despite the fact that they know better,
They
don't
know
do
better because we can make the wrong decision out of ignorance, which is normal, lack of experience, lack of information, lack of knowing what you're doing. And, we cannot blame someone for that. It's part of life. You learn by making mistakes. But when you make the mistakes, or what I call mistakes, knowing what you're doing and knowing what comes after that, I lose a little bit of respect for you. That's just, it's just how it is, and I keep it to myself, like it's we're not here to discuss what the other one is doing right or doing wrong. It's none of my business anyways. But in the other hand, I can appreciate the ones that do it right and yet have a lot of success, and those for me are idols, like yeah, and just throw some names out there of people that I think about a lot and are always like really competitive and winning. I mean, Steve Gerdab, Ken Farrington, guys that are oriented for their horses, build relationships, are super, super cautious of how they manage their horses and what they do. Um, I had the opportunity to actually go just for a few hours to Peter Fredrickson's place.
Mm-hmm.
Loved every side of it.
Isn't it
Like, it's just gorgeous. It's just horse oriented. It's just how he goes about the day, how the horses go about the day. It's just, this is super cool. When you see some riders that have that amount, and I'm not mentioning many others, like, hey, I'm just throwing some names out there.
Yeah.
There's many, many that I have huge respect for and admire immensely. I'm just throwing some out there that just came to mind right now or that I think about often. But this is cool, because it shows you that there are ways that you can have a lot of success and still always keep thinking about what is the best for the horse. And on that line, not to get too much into it, I think that we also have a responsibility not only to the best horses that we ride, also to the other horses. Like, there's some horses that maybe are not, and I say it often, they're not good enough for the high level sport for us, but they for sure can be very good for someone else.
Yeah.
So for me, that's something personal. When in any, and we have a big network now, big family, big business, a lot of horses in all different levels. Any horse that goes through any of our organizations, regardless of their level, has to be treated the way the horses need to be treated. They need to eat properly. They need to spend time outside. Everything needs to be done right. And what happens to them after they come to our barn is very important to us. Do we have full control? Obviously not. But to as much as we can, we would like the horses that sell, that go to other places, to go to the right places. Because I feel that when you do that, you're paying forward, and the horse God, or the horse energy, or whatever you want to call it, is going to give it back to you.
God, I love that.
So I think that we have that responsibility, not only to our horses, but any of the horses that are around us, and to share the message to the younger generation and whoever wants to hear, because that's really the beauty of what we do. That's really the beauty of what we do. I've had the opportunity to meet some adult riders that started riding late in life, and what they feel for those horses and what they feel for the sport is just simply beautiful. How and what they would be willing to do for their horse, that some of them don't even jump. I mean, they barely trot or canter. This is beautiful. That is the magic of our animal, especially in this country that is so expensive. In America, to own a horse, and there's no secret to anyone, in any level, even if you just have it as a trail horse, it's expensive because the vets are expensive, everything's expensive. And people are willing to make the effort of pay what it costs to upkeep a horse because they love it so much. And that just shows you the power of the connection between horse and human. That's amazing. I mean, you don't see these on anything else. I mean, obviously with our dogs, we're willing to do everything, or our pets. But with these horses and keeping them up and taking care of them, and it's just so much, yet we do it with joy.
Yeah. I think I mean, you and I are biased, but I do think that horse people are this really special group of people in the population of humanity, because I think we have this really beautiful connection to nature, this really beautiful interspecies relationship. But also, when we wake up every morning and we know exactly what we're meant to do, and we have a purpose, and we know exactly how we want to move through the world, and that we have goals until the day we die,
Yeah,
because horses are
are
is a
there
lifelong pursuit, right?
for sure.
But I want to go back, because this is the first, and no one could have told me that I was going to talk about good horse karma with Daniel Bluman on the podcast. This makes me, I mean, we've known each other a long time, and I always have just wonderfully rewarding conversations with you. But I'm so excited that here on the podcast, Daniel Bluman is talking about good horse karma, paying it forward, that the horse got, like, I love this idea. It doesn't, and it can be as woo as you like, but I love that you think that way. Like, I really want everyone to hear that you think that way, that you believe that if you care for the horses that you've had in your barn, or in your family and in your program, if you care about what happens to them afterwards, that you believe like that there's a good karma around that the horse gods, like, or whatever it means, that the collective consciousness of horses, that they will somehow, that it will come back to you.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm gonna tell you a very short story because it's something that marked me forever. In our farm, and horse farm, nothing to do with sport. It was just horses in the mountains to trail, to work with the cows and whatever back in Colombia. Someone, I would imagine was my uncle or someone, um, printed something or bought something and put in the wall. And in Spanish, I'm saying the name in Spanish, was Plegaria del Caballo, which if you try to translate, is like the wishes of the horse, or the horse's wish, something like that. And just to summarize what it said, it was pretty much telling you the horse is speaking to you. So this thing that is in writing, the horse is speaking to us, and he's telling us, um, I will serve you, I will do what you ask from me, and all I ask in return is that you feed me, that you take care of me, and that when I am weak and can no longer do it, you allow me to retire with dignity, and in the point that I then am too weak to even continue living, you recognize that it is my time to go, you know? And as a young child, and still it's just feels, it's something I feel too much when I think about it, because I was so young when I was reading it, and I was trying to understand what that meant, like, what is the horse really trying to tell me there, and as I grew older and I got to understand more and more and learn more and more, it all made sense, so this is part of what I live for, you know what I mean? And when you really understand the horses, you understand really what the horse wants. And the horse wants is not what you want. And sometimes you'd be confused, but I think this is the best for the horse. And you're really coming from the right place in your heart. I think that the horse wouldn't want this. But you have to understand, horses are not humans, they're horses. Horses need to live like horses live. Horses need to be horses, like paddocks, for example. I mean, and I understand, I have a lot of colleagues and people that I know, the horses don't go out in the paddock. Maybe they get injured, they're afraid something can happen. And sure, something can happen, but something also can happen in the stall, also when you ride them, also when you're in a jump off, also in many things. But horses are animals that like to be outside.
Yeah.
That is the nature of it. So that just as one example. Other examples, horses, as they're getting older and they're really just too old to be around anymore. People don't want to just let them go. You have to understand, there's a point in life, in nature, that our existence here is expired.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's just one more of the very difficult decisions that we have horsemen have to make. Sometimes you have to do what you have to do for the horse, because this is just the way that the horse life goes, and it goes the same with every other little decision that we're making when we're with them. They, like, as Steve says very often, they don't decide in what class they're going to show. we choose what class they're going to jump. So we have a huge responsibility with the horse. Put it in the right class. Put it where it should jump. Put it where it can perform, where it can perform for many years, where if 1 year after a few is not performing at that level anymore for a variety of reasons, maybe it needs to jump in another level. Now it's time to jump smaller or don't jump at all. But when you're horse conscious and you make these conscious decisions, horse karma happens. They will give it back to you. And if it's not that horse, it will be another one, because it becomes a habit. You start making better decisions.
Like a muscle.
Yeah, you're just doing it. You're just doing it. You're just doing it right. Horse after horse, horse after horse, horse after horse. And then suddenly comes a horse into your life that has the talent, has the physical ability, has the health. And then with all of these great practices that you've accumulated by doing things correctly, that horse, wow, explodes. And then suddenly you have one of those horses that are winning week after week, that the fans love, that people want to see, that people are following. And then all of these things that I tell you, that every human being or most human beings want some recognition, it just happens naturally. But you were not thinking about that. You were thinking about just doing, you got to treat every horse right. It's pretty much the message. Every horse that comes in front of you, you have to treat it right, with respect, and with if not love, with empathy. If you do that, the horses will give it back to you. One of those horses that you treated with love, that you treated with empathy, that you treated with respect, is going to turn out to be special athlete. Yeah. And that special athlete, together with what you've nurtured, becomes a superstar. And that's what I believe. And and if someone has a different philosophy or something, I don't want to hear it, because I like what I believe. So I just want to keep believing that.
I want to acknowledge what you're talking about is the antithesis of objectification. Hey, listener, thank you for listening to this first half. This conversation is so profound that we divided it into a 2-part series so you can really process these concepts. Tune in next week for part 2. He breaks down how to build a career by becoming indispensable to the industry. And he shares a major reality check on how to handle our craving for social media validation. Trust me, you will want to hear this one. Today's episode is brought to you by Conaway & Associates Equine Insurance Services. The friendly and knowledgeable team at Conaway & Associates brings together more than 30 years of experience to offer a wide range of insurance services, including horse insurance, farm insurance, and liability insurance. Visit www.conaway.net to explore options or get in touch today.